Do-do. Doing some things. Armin, hello. Luke, hi. Hey. Guess I'm pretty early. You are literally right on time. I planned on starting this at 3 o'clock in my time anyway. And when you know, I started up 3 o'clock my time. I'm sending out all my info to all the Discords to try and sell myself here. What are the Discords are there? Yeah. Let me self-promo all over, because that's what you got to do these days. You got to self-promo yourself. Promote yourself. Promote yourself. Is anywhere else to self-promo? Anywhere else? Doesn't look like it. I've promoted myself wherever I can. Alright. Self-promo, huh? Guess you really don't allow yourself any fun. Absolutely not. Do you want live on my birthday? Thanks. Thank you. Well, no problem. No problem, fireman. And also, speaking of birthdays, well, first off, happy birthday, fireman. And secondly, this channel just recently had its birthday. On September 13th, this channel turned 2 years old. No Fun Allowed YouTube channel turned 2 years old. Go figure. Can I ask you a question non-D&D related, or how do you set up your making videos or making a stream? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can absolutely ask questions so long as they're not risque, you know. So how do you do your setup for your making videos or making the stream? Well, first off, if you do not know, I'm poor. So first things first, my webcam is, or I don't have a camera. I've got a webcam first off. It's a cheap piece of crap webcam. The mic is a little bit nicer. I don't remember how much this mic was, but the mic is like the nicest thing in my setup. But specifically, if you're talking about my software, I use OBS. Because OBS is incredibly simple. OBS is literally like you can download it and you can literally just click the button right away to start streaming and to start recording. It's incredibly simple. And my background here, I don't have a green screen. I've got a green bed sheet. So you can see behind the scenes there. That's my couch. Because also, if you don't know, I also sit on the ground like a bum. I do not, I don't have a chair to sit in. I'm sitting on the ground. So in regards of the stream is incredibly simple. But in regards to making my videos, it depends on the video that you're looking at in particular. I typically am, whenever I'm making my OBS is not BS. Exactly, right? When I go to make my module review series, I typically have Roll20 laid up, and it's just me in the corner, and then like the little head banner to not give away the URL or anything. And yeah, I just simply record. I record for however long it takes, and then once I need to edit, that is when I take it over to Adobe Studios. Specifically, I use Adobe Premiere. And pretty simple. Thankfully, my content doesn't need too much pizzazz. I simply just cut up the stuff that doesn't belong and just ship it. Thankfully, my content doesn't require that much flair and effort, but consequently, because I don't put that much flair or effort into my content, I don't get as many views as some of my other YouTube contemporaries. Odd ain't my birthday 2-year-old channel friend. Oh, perfect. How do you handle having 6 players? I'm running a module that's more balanced for 3 to 4 players, and combat tends to be a bit of a slog. Okay, that's an important one. That's a big deal, because ultimately, that is a discussion that is well worth having. So let me see if I can... Boom. Just like that. Alrighty, so how do I... maybe I can I shrink this down a little? Can I shrink it? Oh, that looks ugly. Alrighty. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. So how do you handle having 6 players? I'm running a module that's more balanced for 3 to 4 players, and combat tends to be a bit of a slog. So ultimately, D&D is not designed for 6 players, which is really sucky to say. It really sucks to say that. But D&D just isn't balanced for having more than 4 players. Because ultimately what ends up happening is you have to either add more HP, or they have to do more damage, or you add more enemies, or you add stronger enemies. You ultimately have to basically bump numbers up to facilitate that. And that really sucks, because there is no one correct way to do it. It ultimately comes down to your players, specifically their wants and desires, and also, very importantly, the tone, feel, theme, and setting of your game. So, for example, if you're okay with running it quick and dirty, what I would suggest is shaving the HP down on monsters, but increasing their HP. If you have a monster, like let's say there's 2 monsters and they have 50 HP each, it's okay to drop them down to maybe 40 HP each. But instead of them doing, I don't know, let's say 46 on average whenever they go to attack people, instead they do 66 damage or 76 damage. That's one way to increase the tempo of the game, but also keep the lethality. Another way to help handle having 6 players would be to not always have to deal with combat engagements. So I know you specifically saying you're running a module, but it's okay to change the module every once in a while if it means that you can, like, let's say your players normally get into a fight with a monster and, like, you know, that's just it. Like, it's just them versus the monster. That's pretty much it. But instead, you can change the scenario to be, okay, you have the monster, and that's all well and good, but also on the side, oh, hey, there's an NPC that's about to fall down the well, and someone needs to grab them. Oh, hey, there's a cat in a tree, and the tree's on fire. Someone needs to grab that cat. Oh, hey, there's zombies knocking on the door of people, and you hear people screaming from inside. Or it could be reversed. It could be people holding a door against zombies that are bashing their way in. And that way you can create a combat scenario that isn't just all about combat, and thus it's not necessarily going to be a slog. Because, you know, if you just have more monsters on the field, then it's just going to be the same old fight. But if you have multiple engagements going on at the same time, that's going to be engaging. You know, you have 6 players, and then they divvy the responsibilities up. They could say, all right, we're going to have 3 people engaging the monsters, and then we're going to have 1 person go and get the cat out of the tree, and then we're going to have 2 people try and hold the door against the zombies. And right there, you can add a dynamicism to the game where even if combat does take long, at least there's moving parts and moving pieces that aren't just, I go to fight more monsters. I deal more damage. We go against more spongy foes. So that is my solution. Oh, God. That is my solution. Change numbers up and down. Add dynamic encounters. Morning, 8 a.m. here. How's it going? Nate? Sit on the ground like a bum. Yep. I recommend to introduce the 1 to 10 timer for combat. In 5e, that would be 1 minute per turn. That's fair, except what ultimately ends up always happening is someone asks for a rules clarification, or more importantly, a spell goes off, and the spell takes longer. You know, there's plenty of players that know exactly what they're doing all the time, and they're ready to go lickety-split. But ultimately, there's also a lot of players that need a bit more time to be more methodical because they don't want to mess up, and it'll just be not a pleasant game if they're constantly being rushed. So that obviously comes down to the individual table. At first, it'll be hard to adjust it to, but over time, as players get better at it, you as the DM get better at it, speeds up the process a lot. Yeah, that too. You know, it is growing pains for sure. How windy is it for you? Not terribly windy today. Question, how do I know if I should cut people out or too many players in a campaign or game in D&D as a new DM? Okay, that's a good one, Luke. That's a good one. So, how do you know if I should cut people out, too many players in a campaign or game in a D&D as a new DM? So what I'm here to tell you is, as I go to drink water, what I'm here to tell you is there is technically no limit to how many people you can have in a game. You can have 30 people in a single session at a time. And for some people, that might be enjoyable. Now, what I'm here to tell you is, as a new DM, when you're trying to run a coherent game where you don't have to spend a bunch of time on prep and you get things accomplished in each individual session, I would tell you your max should probably be 5. Because 4 is the sweet spot number of you got a dynamic pool of players. 5 is the tipping point. After 5, I find that the game bogs down a bit too hard, specifically 5e, mind you. I find that 5 players is probably like the cut, because what really ends up happening after 5 is, think about how much time there is in a session. Like, let's say you run a 3-hour session. Divide all the time in that session by, let's say that the DM gets a third of that time. Let's say like a solid third. So in a 3-hour game, the DM gets 1 hour because the DM is describing things, because the DM's role-playing characters, because the DM's moving the monsters around. The DM gets a third of the time, so let's say 1 hour. Then, let's divvy up the rest of the time. So 2 hours between 6 people. How much time is that per player? And that, like, this is just like a blanket, like, general thing. This isn't, absolutely precise numbers. But ultimately, the more players you have, the less time individuals get to do their thing. And unfortunately, that just isn't great. I know that as a player, I want to shine most of the time. I'm actually perfectly okay with not being in the spotlight. I'm perfectly happy being the support character all the time. But I'm a weirdo. I think most people want to show up to the game to do things and enjoy a game where they can repeatedly do things. And when you have too many players at the table, it cuts into the time of you shining. It cuts into the time of you just interacting with the world. It cuts into a lot of your time. So what I would suggest is, I mean, it always sucks. I know. You can definitely get into one of those scenarios where you don't want to be rude, right? You don't want to invite 4 people, and then one person invites their friend, and another person invites their friend, and then you've got people coming in and out all about. It sucks to say, hey, I don't want to do this. But you have to be respectful about it and say, hey, I'm not being rude here. What I'm going to say is, I am only comfortable running X number of people. And once again, I would suggest having 5 be your limit. I would strongly suggest that. And I would say, hey, this isn't like, I don't want to kick you out, or I don't want to exclude you from the table. It's just that I want to run an enjoyable game for everyone here, and I can only do that for so many people. And if your schedule does allow it, then you can absolutely run 2 different games when you can try and, divvy up the people. Like, instead of having 1 game of 6, you could have 2 games of 3. That would, I think, be a lot more enjoyable than having. I would personally rather have 2 games of 3 than 1 game of 6. So my recommendation there is be respectful about not only your prep time. Oh, did I just press Alt? What the heck? But also everyone's time at the table. That is my solution to that. Hello, Nick. Roman, thank you. That was very helpful. No problem. I don't want to be rude yet. Dwarven Moss, hey y'all. Hey, Dwarven Moss. Rule clarification is not part of the timer. True, but like, let's say you're the fighter and then you've got the wizard. It feels really lame if you're the fighter and you say, "All right, I swing my sword," and your turn's done in like 30 seconds, and then the wizard says, "Hey, I want to cast this spell, but how does that interact with that?" And then you end up spending like 3 to 4 minutes on their turn. Even if you don't consider that as part of the timer, that still feels a bit unfair. And that's honestly coming from personal experience. I've been at the table where I know exactly what I'm doing and I do it, and then someone else doesn't know what they're doing, and it just eats into the time, and it just doesn't feel fun. Wanted to give a shout out to you, NFA. Just ran Camp Righteous, part of TOA, and I felt so at ease after hearing you watch your videos and breakdowns. Thank you for all the help you gave us all. No problem, Dwarven. That's why I make the adventure module guides, is because I know that, or I want to help people. And I knew that they were going to help some people, and that's fantastic. Hey, NFA. What's up, chat? What's up, Mike? So yeah, so speaking of adventure module guides, I've taken a bit of a break for the past few months, if you couldn't tell, because I've just been incredibly busy with other things and whatnot. But I will be returning to making adventure module guides, not on 1, not on 2, but on 3 separate adventures. I will be making adventure module guides on Tales from the Undead Portal, Descent into Avernus, and Out of the Abyss. And those will be releasing around the same time. So there will be a little bit of something for everybody who is running those particular modules. A little bit of something for everybody. Do a face reveal? I mean... It's funny, I don't think that there's any major D&D YouTubers that aren't that are faceless. I think there's exactly like 3 D&D like and when I say major, I'm going to say like arbitrarily like I think like major in the D&D realm is anybody that's got, I don't know, let's say 5k subs. I don't know, I think there's exactly like 3 D&D YouTubers that are faceless. Because ultimately, I think that like D&D is very much so driven by personality, and you can absolutely be a personality without showing your face, but I think that it's very much so easier to be a personality with your face. I am in the early stages of Descent into Avernus, so I look forward to it. Heck yeah, Jacob. I'm sure this is a tough one to answer, but what's your favorite official module? Easy. That's not even a tough one. That is a super easy question. So, when it comes... So, I'm just going to naturally assume that you are asking what is my favorite 5th edition adventure module. I'm going to naturally assume that. And when it comes to 5th edition adventure modules, I am here to say that my favorite one is, without a shadow of a doubt, Tomb of Annihilation. Because Tomb of Annihilation has it all, baby. It's got a wonderful jungle to explore. It's got a fantastic combat scenarios. It's got fantastic characters to roleplay with. It's got the 3 pillars of D&D to an absolute astounding degree. And also, very importantly, it is not a linear adventure like some of the more recent adventures where your players are going down the same track. No. Tomb of Annihilation is very much so an adventure module that gives the impetus to the players to explore where they want to explore, and you as the DM, the impetus to flesh out where you want to flesh out. I absolutely love Tomb of Annihilation. TOA. all the way. Ultimately, TOA. How do I work this thing? How do I do this? Also, boop. Can I do that? There we go. TOA all the way. Ultimately, I think TOA is just the complete package for 5th edition modules, and it's just so incredible. I've ran it 3 times, and I want to run it more. I am going to run it more. It's just so absolutely just it's so complete in that it's not complete. I love it. Ooh, I want to run a furnace perfectly. Are you making notes or something? Also, do I hear people in the background? I'm not making note. Well, I guess I am making notes on the side, but these are just like, I'm just writing the answers and questions here. And also, you probably do hear people in the background because some people yell and scream when they don't need to yell or scream. Yes, sir, 5th edition. Nice. I'm totally experiencing this now. Heck yeah. Yes, TOA for the win. That's a little dope, a little Triceratops there. Do I run TOA as a milestone? Ultimately, yes, because 5e, I've ran 5e using XP a number of times, and I can tell you from my own personal experience that purely vanilla XP of 5e is just not great. Ultimately, XP was designed in original D&D because all of the classes leveled up differently. The fighting man leveled up faster than the cleric, and the cleric leveled up faster than the magic user. And then when the thief came around, the thief actually leveled up quicker than everybody else. The XP made perfect sense for a game where people leveled up at different rates. You know, the thief would level up almost twice as fast as the magic user. And you know, flash forward all the way to today, there isn't any need for that because everyone levels up at the same time. And beyond just that whole, you know, the thing of leveling up at the same time, the problem with 5e XP is that it can, in fact, be a limiting factor in your games. But that's not what I'm really majorly concerned about. It's also the fact of XP is only given out purely as written for monsters. And then the books have recommendations for like, in Curse of Strahd, if your players go to X place and touch this thing, then they get 500 XP. The way you give out XP is how your players are going to play the game. If you give out XP for killing monsters, you're going to run a monster killing game. If you give out XP for clearing hexes, you're going to run a hex clearing game. If you give XP for, you know, the gold, 1 gold equals 1 XP, then you're going to get a gold collection game. So ultimately, I don't run 5e as a XP game anymore. I've ran it a few times, and I'm probably never going to do it again. But other game systems, absolutely. Other game systems, XP works fantastically. What would I say is my least favorite module in 5e? Ooh, spicy. So ultimately, I have I've touched every single 5e module. I've touched every single one. And oh, hey, I'm sorry, I got to go by. Fireman, thank you for the dono. Thank you so very much. Thank you. So I've touched every single module, whether that be me being a player or a DM. And I am trying to like work my way back and DM every single one. I'm trying, but it takes a bit of time, and I'm running a bunch of other game systems, and I'm running other adventures, and I'm working on my own adventures. I've got a bunch of things, so I'm a little bit busy. And if you couldn't tell, I've got this YouTube channel here. My least favorite adventure module of the whole 5e lineup would have to sadly be Princes of the Apocalypse. I love the concept for Princes of the Apocalypse. You got 4 elemental cults. You've got a town on the savage frontier. You've got these 4 major dungeons. You've got this sprawling wilderness. It's got a lot of things going for it that sound great. But every single time I've gone to touch that adventure, something, it just feels off about it. It doesn't feel natural to me. I think ultimately the problem with Prince of the Apocalypse is the fact that the beginning is good and the ending I think is great. All right, I'll reverse that. I'll say that the beginning is great and I think the ending is good. But that in between, that middle spot in Prince of the Apocalypse, it feels hollow to me in a sense. It feels unnatural. What ends up happening in Prince of the Apocalypse, without going into spoilers, mind you, is that you have to keep on plugging away at these adventure sites, and then you have to move on. Like, you dip your toes into a place, and then you got to back out. And that just doesn't feel natural for 5e. Now, I'm trying to think here. When you run a lot of old school stuff, where you're these pathetic losers and you only got like 5 HP and you die at 0 HP, then it was perfectly normal to go into the dungeon, you get hit once and you say, hey, all right, let's go back out. Like, that was part of the experience. But 5e isn't trying to tell that experience. 5e is trying to tell a new adventure. 5e is ultimately trying to do things a certain way. And, it very much so is like the case of 5e is not a game system that replicates and produces all sorts of adventure styles. And I think Prince of the Apocalypse is just somewhat of a mismatch for 5e. So, sadly, Princes of the Apocalypse. What is your opinion on the Spelljammer adventure? Okay. That is very topical, and in fact, I should probably make a video about that because it only just came out recently, and I should probably try and get all those views real quick. Ultimately, my opinion on the Spelljammer adventure, which is the Light of Zarsis. Oh my gosh. The Spelljammer adventure is literally a movie. The Spelljammer adventure is not an adventure where you get plopped into a place and you can go anywhere and do anything. The Spelljammer adventure is a true roller coaster style adventure. When you show up to a session, you are exactly where the DM tells you where you are. You are going to where the DM tells you where to go, and you are doing what the DM tells you what to do. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that adventure. There is no leeway. The adventure is truly a movie theater adventure. You are along for the ride. You are watching things go on in front of you. And that's the end of story. The only semblance of freedom that you have, in that whole adventure is the dungeons, where, like, instead of moving to, room 2 to the left, maybe you can go to room 5, which is, like, north. That's pretty much the only freedom you have in the whole adventure. My opinion on that is I don't think that's great adventure design, but I know that there's people that enjoy that. I know that there's people who are absolutely fine for a beer and pretzel style game where you show up and you absolutely go and do whatever. You do the things that the DM tells you what to do, and that's perfectly fine. And especially I think that is probably sometimes better for new players that don't want to have analysis paralysis and go wherever they want to go and whatnot. But I personally don't enjoy running those as much because the best thing about DMing for me is not knowing what's going to happen. And unfortunately, when, like, the Spelljammer adventure, you know exactly what's going to happen. It literally tells you in the adventure what's going to happen. And that's not always my favorite. It's not my spell jam. Ha 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 ha. Aww. So yeah, it's not my spell jam, is what I'll say. In summation. What about the Stranger Things and Rick and Morty starter sets? My impression is that DMs don't consider them legitimate modules. I wouldn't consider them legitimate modules either, because they're not. Because those things are like 1 to 2 shots at most. I would only ever consider like the 5e modules are the ones that are going to take like more than 4 sessions. Now, what's really interesting about that is there are a whole bunch, like if you look back to D&D Days of Old, with those classic adventures like the Alphabet series, you know, whether that be B2, Keep on the Borderlands, or X1, or, you know, T, whatever. Some of those adventure modules were, in fact, able to be completed in 1 session. But nowadays, when we think of the 5e adventure module lineup, they all are huge. You know, they're 150 to like, you know, 300-page tomes. With the exception, of course, with the Spelljammer one. The Spelljammer adventure is only like 60 pages. So, you know, purely by the vernacular of what is an adventure module, I would say that Stranger Things and Rick and Morty are technically adventure modules, but not how like the rest of the 5e adventure modules truly are. I mean, you can kind of say the same thing for, you know, so there's the Stranger Things and Rick and Morty sets, and then there's like an adventure in the Ravnica, there's an adventure in Theros, there's an adventure in the Eberron, there's an adventure in all of those setting things, but they're really small. They're really nothing to write home about. Oh, here we go. How do I improve on non-combat sessions, because I feel like my players are saying they're too boring or not exciting compared to combat-heavy sessions? Ooh, okay, that's a big one there. So, how do we improve on non-combat sessions? So, what I'm here to tell you is there will absolutely be groups that do not want non-combat sessions, right? There absolutely will be groups that simply say, oh yeah, I'll, you know, combat, let's go. And they don't necessarily care about the non-combat sessions. So before I even go into like describing how to improve non-combat sessions, it may be very well just worth asking your players, hey, like, do you guys even want non-combat sessions in the first place? Like, or do you just like every single session we're having a fight? Because then maybe your players just always want to fight. That's perfectly fine. Run the game that they want to play. But if they do actually want non-combat sessions, and they're saying it's currently boring right now and not exciting compared to combat-heavy sessions, then you have to make it exciting through in-game implications and in-game consequences. So the perfect example being the roleplay side of things, you know, the social interaction. Your players have to know that their social interactions with people are going to have consequences. They need to know that when they go to talk with the king, and the king presents them the dilemma of siding with, you know, him or, you know, or going against him, your players need to feel the weight of their choices. Your players need to know that when they go to talk to that person on the side of the street that says, "Hey, I'll give me 10 gold and I'll quadruple it by next time." Your players need to feel the consequences of their actions, and you definitely don't need to do combat with that. The consequences of their actions can be felt through the in-game world. The NPCs could die or end up missing or captured. The town can be damaged or changed. Their social status can be compromised or elevated. So, from the social interaction standpoint, they need to feel as if their choices are changing the world, because they should be. You know, we're only watching the game from the player's standpoint and view, so we need to make it feel like the game is actually changing depending on their actions. Now, on the second pillar here of exploration, your players need to explore places that are worth exploring. Your players need to go to places that feel unique. Your players need to go to places that are engaging and gripping. And also, very importantly, is there's a lot of things you can do that aren't combat, but mimic combat. So, for a perfect example, your players are climbing the mountain to get to the hand of the gods, an ancient tower that is fabled to have, a magical artifact brimming within. As your players are climbing the mountain, an avalanche rains down. Roll initiative. And as they're rolling initiative, you describe to them, okay, you can move here and do this, or you can use a feat action to move, or you can try and, what do you want to do? And you can have them, engaged in the mechanics of the game through exploration, but not have it necessarily be combat. So, those are my 3 tips there. 1, ask them, hey, do you want combat, or are you okay with, do you guys actually just want combat all the time? 2, make social interaction truly impactful into the world. 3, have your players explore places that are worth exploring. And I'll go ahead and write that down. 1, ask if they don't care about non-combat sessions. 2, make social interaction impactful on the world. And 3, explore places worth exploring. And that is my solution to all that fun jazz. What's the difference between an adventure module and a world setting? So adventure modules are typically like, hey, your players meet up with these NPCs and they go to these dungeons and they go off on this adventure. And world settings are typically just, hey, here's this world. Like looking at, let's say, Ravnica. Oh, hey, here is the world of Ravnica. Here's what's in the world of Ravnica. There's guilds, and there's these goblins, and there's these factions, and people get their powers through this. And so you can make an adventure out of a world setting, but natively a world setting is just a world setting. An adventure module actually thrusts the players into an adventure. Hoo-wee. Ooh-wee. Ah. Good old water. So I've also, in addition to writing all my things and making all my videos, I've also been working on my 1D&D. And because for those of you that don't know, I'm making my own version of 1D&D. And right now I'm on the equipment portion of it, because equipment is a big deal. Because ultimately now, hello there, Andrew. Hope you're having a good afternoon. I am, Andrew, I am. Because as of right now, equipment in 5e is as follows. When it comes to weapons, you take the one with the most damage. When it comes to armor, you take the one that gives you the most AC. And Equipment should be so much more engaging than that. Equipment is so boring right now. So right now I'm working on ways to actually make the equipment feel unique from other equipments. And that's a ton of fun. And then after I get done working on equipment, then I will start working on looking at the 3 pillars of 1D&D, which will be combat, exploration, and social interaction. And that is going to be a heck of a doozy because, combat is the majority of the game. Exploration is next to non-existent in D&D, and social interaction is next to non-existent in D&D. And when I say social interaction is next to non-existent in D&D, I mean the rules surrounding it are next to non-existent. So I will actually be implementing rules to explore and rules to socially interact in the game. So that'll be a fun time there. And then after that, I will also be looking at monster design. That's going to be a fun one. When it comes to monster design for 1D&D, I'm going to be pulling up a whole bunch of other monster stat blocks from all the other major tabletop role-playing games and comparing and contrasting, seeing how they actually function and what is their purpose. Now, all of you, I assume, have all played around 5e. 5e monster stat blocks take up a page. They're so freaking big. And for the fact that they take up a full page, how much should they actually tell us? How much should they infer? What are your thoughts on the new magic groupings in 1D&D? I think that's fine. I think that the magic groupings in 1D&D are a good way to, or at least a decent-ish way, to separate the spellcasters. But what I'm here to tell you is they're trying to come up with a solution to a problem they created, in that spellcasters feel too samey, because if a wizard casts a spell and a sorcerer casts a spell, and they both cast the same spell, it doesn't matter that they're different classes because they casted the same spell. Ultimately, the problem is with 5e spellcasting, and it's going to be now 1D&D spellcasting, is that the spellcasters feel too samey when they're casting spells. I think the solution there is they need to strongly reinforce the core class while at the same time separating the spellcasting. And, grouping the spells up, they've already... it's really just a name tag for something that was already there, but was just invisible, right? Because clerics had spells that only clerics could cast. Warlocks had spells that only warlocks could cast. Those things have already been there. So I think it's just it's a Band-Aid that doesn't cover up the wound. I think it's okay, but they really need to do more. So what are my thoughts on it? They need to do more to fix the sameness of spellcasters. And ultimately, one of the major culprits of this is the bard. Because when you look at the wizard and the sorcerer, they cast the same spells, but at the very least, the sorcerer, when they cast their spells, they can make the spell a bit different. Oh, hey, the sorcerer can, when they shoot a fireball, they can actually use a sorcerer point to make it into an ice ball. When the sorcerer casts a spell, haste, they can actually twin cast it and hit 2 people instead. Woo. But bard is the ultimate, just terrible design, in that they're literally just a wizard that can basically, they cast the same spells as the wizard. They can't change the spell around. They just cast wizard spells. And so one of the things I'm going to be doing in my 1D&D is I'm going to be making Bard the true Bard that it should be. I'm going to be returning Bard back to its bardy glory, and not just a wizard light. I'm going to make Bard a Bard, like no Bard has ever barded before. And then what else do I have there? So I've got the monster design. I'm going to be working on feats, a basic 1D&D for level 0 play, the advanced 1D&D for play past the high levels. And yeah, I've got a bunch of things going on with that. I just finished the campaign playing as a bard, and I definitely felt like a worse wizard. Good points. Yeah, and that's really unfortunate because the whole point of playing a class is to play the class, right? The whole point of playing a class is to feel unique. When there was only 4 classes in the game, you know, the fighter, the cleric, the magic user, and the thief, they all felt incredibly unique. And then, you know, flash forward to today, we've got now, I think, 11 classes, 12 classes? Artificer, Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard. We have 13 classes. So we have 13 classes, and some of them really step on each other's toes. What is the number one change in making to monster stat blocks, if I may ask? So I will be covering that in a series of videos coming out in the future, where I'm making like a full-on PDF of, you know, I'm making a full-on PDF of my 1D&D as well as, you know, making the videos on it. But ultimately, we're going to remove the fat from the stat blocks, because once again, stat blocks take up anywhere between a quarter to a full page. And yet they tell us next to nothing, and they're very wordy. Very, very wordy. So we're going to be trimming a lot of the fat. We're going to implement something that D&D desperately needs, which is tags. We need tags. So every single time, if you look at the monster stat block there, every single time a monster goes to make the same attack, there can be 50 monsters that have the same exact attack that implements the same sort of penalty or the same sort of thing. And instead of there being a simple tag, which when you look at it, you automatically know what it is. Instead, every single time they have it written out for you. Every single time. And that's not good. That really isn't. It's just a waste of space. So we're going to be implementing monster tags. So that way it's like, okay, this monster does insert tag. And instead of having to read out, 3 sentences and taking up a bunch of space, it just simply has that tag right there. So that's a major thing I'm going to be implementing. Tags everywhere. I think Paladin could just be a fighter subclass with cleric spells and smites. Hot takes. Yeah, so interesting enough, the thought process behind the Paladin was that originally they were clerics. Because, going back all the way back to early D&D, clerics were typically like very, very heavy melee people. Because in original D&D, there was the fighting man, the cleric, the magic user, and the wizard's not, or the magic user, I should say. The magic user obviously isn't going to tank, and then the cleric had less spell slots, so you would just ultimately always get down to melee anyway. And it was typically perceived that the paladin was just a cleric that really, really leaned in on the melee. And then eventually later on, they actually implemented the Paladin class. Now, something I'm going to be talking about in one of my videos coming up about the whole the Paladin fighter thing is, I think Paladin certainly has its place in 5e, but it needs a serious rework. And also very importantly is the fighter needs an incredibly serious rework, because the fighter right now is not being the best fighter, which is not good. The fighter should be the best fighter. The fighter should feel good. And he even did them in alphabetical order. Nice job. Wouldn't you know? I'm a D&D nerd. Wouldn't you know? What's your favorite type of water? LOL, JK, JK. You know, I like filtered water, you know. What would you do to make gold matter again in D&D? Ah, yes, that is also another thing I'm going to be addressing in 1D&D, or my 1D&D. Make gold matter again. So, right now, gold is worthless. Right now, in 5e, the only reason you get gold is to get the fighters and whatever else. You get them their plate armor, and then that's it. You don't need gold for anything else. You don't need to stay indoors. You don't need to buy mansions. You don't need to hire people. You don't need to buy food. Gold is worthless. Worthless, worthless, worthless. So how do we go about fixing that? I've already got several ideas like in my head, and I'll be writing them out and, you know, once again, making videos on this. But we need to make gold matter again. Because otherwise, if gold, like right now, you know, you go to the dungeon and, you know, it just doesn't matter. Like, the only thing you care about is magical items. Because purely as written, there is no magical shops in D&D. I know a lot of people homebrew in magic shops where you spend your hard-earned gold on magical items. But one, that's homebrew. And two, I personally think that having a magical item shop removes the magic nature of magical items for me. What about gold for wizards? I mean, you'd have to answer me this. How often in games does it matter that the wizard can transcribe spells into the spellbook? How many adventures do you run in 5e where you have enough significant downtime where that happens? I personally, from personal experience, you know, that almost never happens. Most 5e games are very quick games in regards of the time management, and there's very little downtime. I'm sure plenty of games do have downtime, but I think that the average 5e game, there isn't that much downtime. It's just adventure, adventure, adventure. So, what do we do to make gold matter again in D&D? We can reintroduce management, reinforce, what do you call that thing? Oh my gosh, reinforce lifestyle, and give bonuses. So management, that would tie back to land and governance. Once you reach a certain level, then you can become a baron or a lord or, you know, a high priest or whatever, and you create buildings and you staff them and you do whatever. In regards of reinforcing lifestyle, when you are in town and civilization, you spend gold, and that gives you a certain lifestyle, and that also doubles into giving bonuses, where the more gold you spend, the more native bonuses you have for X amount of time. If you live in, you know, wealth for a long time, then you maybe get bonuses to your constitution, and maybe you get favors and you get privileges. Versus if you don't spend any of your gold, then you get, like, you actually get worse things, like people don't like you because you're smelly, and you don't help out the poor and all that. So things of that nature. What is your favorite class and subclass and race, and least favorite of all of them, and why? Oh God. So, that's a tough one. I'm not typically a player all that often, so I I don't know if I have a least favorite. From a player standpoint, anyway, from a player's perspective. But my favorite class and subclass would just natively be the fighter, specifically the battle master, because in human by the way, human battle master fighter would be my most favorite combo because there's something special about a person that can just wave around a sword and they're still able to contend against people that hurl fireballs, and they're able to fight giant monsters and dragons. There's something cool about the image of somebody like just an average Joe being able to rise to the occasion. Now, my least favorite of all those, I can't really say. I can't really say. I personally don't have too many issues with many of the class. I mean, maybe the Artificer, because the Artificer doesn't fit into a lot of campaign themes. I guess. So fighter, my fave. Artificer, because it doesn't belong in every game. How would I fix Monk? So, so I will be doing a redesign of every single class in 5e for 1D&D. Monk is obviously up there on the priority list because, as many people will state, Monk is currently the worst class in the game. And what's funny is, you only need to make a few changes to make it good. It's actually very minuscule how much effort you have to actually put in to make Monk good again. So, funnily enough, one of the things I'm going to be doing for Monk is removing their Stunning Strike. Because Stunning Strike is just the only real reason why anyone ever plays Monk. Because once you reach 5th level, whenever you hit someone, you just dap in a little key point here and there and everywhere, and then you get stuns everywhere. Now, I'm removing that because that's just boring. But what I'm giving Monk in return is something far greater. I'm giving them more options for their key points. I'm giving them more key points. And also, very importantly, is I'm extending their crit range. Monks no longer only crit on natural 20s. Monks have an extended crit range. And that will help a significant portion. That will help out a lot. Just some simple changes right there of giving them more options, giving them more key points, and giving them extended crit range. That will absolutely drive Monk up from being the worst to not being the absolute worst. More options, more key points, extended crit range. Because right now in 5e, the only class and subclass that has an extended crit range would be the champion fighter and the warlock eldritch knight. No, not eldritch knight. Eldritch something. And unfortunately, that's not good enough. The monk, several of the martial classes will be getting extended crit ranges because that's only fair. It only makes sense that way. So that's my go-to fix for the monk. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. Alrighty. Today's live stream was a little impromptu. I just had a little bit of free time, and I wanted to get a little stream in here because I think I'll only be able to release like maybe 1 or 2 videos this next week, but then the week after is when I'm going to be releasing a regular, steady stream of videos. I think I've got a video format down where I'm going to be releasing 3 videos through the week. I think I'm going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then 1 on the weekend. So I think Saturday or Sunday. And the ones during the week will be Out of the Abyss, Tales from the Unknown Portal, and Descend to Avernus. And then the one on the weekend, I think, will be the Fixing 1 D&D. So I think I'll have like a steady rotation of those videos there. Do I collect minis? Nope. Not at all. Too poor for that. Nope. Way too poor. Minis, unfortunately, are for people that both play in person and have money, and I'm neither of those. The few times that I ever do play in person, I'll just use like little paper cutouts for the minis. You know, don't need to bust out the minis. Just minis. Like it's tough. Like if I only played in person, then I would probably do that. Probably, but I mostly play online. The overwhelming majority of my games are played online, so thankfully I don't need to collect minis. I can just create my own little tokens here and there and everywhere. What the heck? What in the world is going on in the background here? Okay. I just finished Descend to Avernus campaign, cut C1 completely, and used Avernus as a sandbox from DM's Guild. It was a great campaign. Now I'm starting Stroud with that group. Heck yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna be making a lot of like it sucks. Like Avernus like has great potential, but I think that there's a large part of it that just needs to be cut to make it a overall better adventure. And yeah, I think cutting Baldur's Gate from it is just genuinely a decent way to go. It's ironic that the adventure is called Baldur's Gate Descend to Avernus when the Baldur's Gate portion is just tacked on. And that really sucks. Because if you haven't been paying attention to the 5e modules, they came out with Waterdeep Dragon Heist, then they came out with Baldur's Gate, and then they came out with what do you call that thing? Oh my gosh. Icewind Dale. And like they're basically banking on the namesake places to sell the adventures. But the difference between Baldur's Gate and the other ones is that Waterdeep Dragon Heist takes place in Waterdeep, and it's all about Waterdeep. Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, takes place all in Icewind Dale, and it's all about Icewind Dale. But Baldur's Gate Descend to Avernus, it's only about Baldur's Gate for like a little bit. It just feels unnecessary. Like there should have been a true Baldur's Gate adventure. There should have been a absolute like just Baldur's Gate adventure. And then there should have been a Descent into Avernus campaign that's all about descending to Avernus. But for some reason the two were married and it doesn't work in my opinion. And I think in a lot of people's opinion. I think Descend to Avernus is relatively regarded it is like a low, low-ish in regards of whatever ranking. Enemies with psionic powers who enslave people. Any advice for navigating this minefield of potential consent-related triggers? Yeah, that's definitely a tough one. So ultimately, the easiest solution is just not to do it. Just number one, just don't do it. Number two, just ask your players if they're okay with that. And if they're okay, then they're okay. And then number three, ultimately, I think I would say that if they are okay with it, then you make it clear that the people are like being charmed or enthralled, and you don't have them be like, "Oh yeah, we're totally happy to do this." You know, I'd make it very much clear and to the point that they know what's up. Like everybody knows what's up. So 1, don't do it. 2, ask everyone if it's okay. And 3, make sure everyone knows what's up. I want to use all the Baldur's Gate info in the book and run a murder mystery political thriller type adventure campaign. Yeah, and that's the... So I counted it for my review that'll be coming out like in a week, I believe. I counted it up. Of the 256 pages in Baldur's Gate Descend to Avernus, 90 pages were dedicated to Baldur's Gate. 90. They sat there and were like, yeah, we're going to make, 90 pages of this book all about Baldur's Gate. And then we're not going to have the actual adventure be in Baldur's Gate. And it sucks, because the Baldur's Gate is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most iconic part of D&D. Because Baldur's Gate, the video game, was and still is one of the biggest and best video games of all time. Regularly, you will see on top 100 best video games of all time list, Baldur's Gate will be up there. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. You will regularly see that people love Baldur's Gate. And I know for a fact that they were just banking on that name when they made this adventure. I know for a fact. There's no way they didn't, right? And once again, it just sucks because they did Waterdeep, and I what I imagine was going on at the Wizard of the Coast office was they said, "All right, gang, we just did Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and we just had a full city adventure. All right, so we want to bank on Baldur's Gate, but we don't want to have another city adventure. What do we do here?" And that, unfortunately, just like, I feel like they could have just like taken a bit of time, or they could have done something else. But like, they wanted to have the best of both worlds. They wanted to both have Baldur's Gate on the name for the namesake, but at the same time, they also didn't want to have a repeat of adventure setting being just a city. And I think it was just such a blunder. Have you read the Baldur's Gate D&D Next module? It is a city-wide political thriller. I don't remember which adventure that was. The D&D Next module that's in Baldur's Gate. D&D Next Baldur's Gate. Which adventure was that? Yeah, I can't remember which one that was. Something like Murder in the City. Okay. D&D Murder in the City. D&D Next, I should say. Murder in Baldur's Gate. That's the name of it. And I will post it for all you people that are curious as well. I have not looked at this adventure. What do we have going on in this adventure? We've got all of the areas, a day in Baldur's Gate, a night in Baldur's Gate, history of the city, the Council of Four, officers of the city, Parliaments appears. The Flaming Fist, the Guild, the Gay Deities, Merchants, Cafes, Death and Taxes, Mysterious Locations. Okay. Okay. And apparently it was written by Ed Greenwood? Question mark? No. Never mind. Authors Greg Bilsland, Matthew Cernett, and Steve Winter. Okay. Oh no, it does say Murder in Baldur's Gate by Ed Greenwood. Okay. I'm trying to figure out like what the product is supposed to be. About the encounter format, with the move away from 4A mechanics, it's unsurprising that the traditional encounter format was also on its last legs. Murder in Baldur's Gate maintained the traditional idea of limiting the amount of play for each week of the season by dividing the adventure into 12 stages, but these stages were very free form. Yeah, the whole transition from 4th edition to 5th edition with D&D Next, like there was a lot of like confusion about how they were going to regulate a lot of the rules, and a lot of those didn't translate over. Interesting. Um, I see some negative reviews for it because people are complaining about the print on demand. The print on demand apparently was not good, and it's not even up for print on demand right now. It's really a shame too, because like if the DM's Guild and what do you call it thing, the drive through RPG, if they had print on demand for everything, I think they'd get a lot more traction, because there's a lot of people that they just love having physical copies, and unfortunately that you can't always have physical copies. Alrighty. Interesting. Okay. Good to know. And it sucks too, because like I'm curious about the like the adventure structure that they're gonna go from now on, because I think they've tapped out the Sword Coast. Like besides Neverwinter, because there hasn't been a camp adventure in Neverwinter yet. I think that they've pretty much tapped out the Sword Coast, and that means they're going to have to expand their adventure sites for 5e, and I'm curious about like what they're going to do from now on. I mean, we know for a fact that they're going to be redoing Phandelver, but who knows? The future of D&D is a mystery to us all, it seems. Alrighty. Ugh. Goodness gracious. Okay. What else am I doing? I'm not really doing too much else besides just recording all my videos and writing all of my adventures and doing all my various freelance stuff and doing my continual set of posts and whatnot. Besides all that busy grunt work, I'm not doing too much else. I need to run some one-shots, some more one-shots for my community though. I've been unfortunately very preoccupied for like the past month, I feel like, but yeah, I need to run more one-shots. I'll be posting about that soon once I know my schedule, because I want to run some games for people. I love running games for folk. And hopefully I can get more people in and get them playing some good games. And because I know there's a lot of people out there that never get to play. And heck, maybe I'll play test out some of my stuff on everybody. That could be a double whammy right there. 2 birds with 1 stone. Oh. Thought I heard something funny. Alrighty. So, anything else? Anybody got any comments, concerns, gripes, moans, complaints? Anybody got anything? Any tips for keeping a 1-shot from becoming a 2-shot? TBKs. Well, so ultimately, the vernacular of a 1-shot doesn't necessarily mean just a one-off session. Like specifically, what a 1-shot is supposed to be is a 1-shot is supposed to be a self-contained adventure, and so a 1-shot can be multiple sessions, but it's supposed to be a very, very self-contained adventure. Now, of course, nowadays we typically refer to 1-shots as just being single sessions. The tip to keeping a 1-shot from becoming a 2-shot is to make sure that whatever you have written out, no matter what adventure you're running, you have to make sure that you can cut out some fat. So, like a perfect example being, Mike, is that I recently ran all of the what do you call those things? The Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel adventures. And some of the ones at the end get monstrously long. Like I think the last 2, or maybe one of them has potentially 10 combats in it. And you know it, I know it, everyone knows it. 5e combat takes frickin' forever. And if you were to run 9 to 10 combats, it'd be physically impossible to do that in a single session. It's not going to happen. Not with 5e. Especially at high level, too. Those are, like, the higher level adventures, they're like 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So, what you have to do is you have to sit there and recognize what fat you can cut. Because you look at the pacing of your game and you're like, okay, we're 30 minutes in and we haven't done anything at all. Ooh, this means that I probably need to cut something here. So analyze your adventure and figure out what fat you can cut. So find the fat that can be cut if need be, then execute it if time takes too long. Because ultimately, so for the example of that one, there's potentially 9 to 10 combats in that thing. I'm not running 9 to 10 combats in a single session. I'm not doing it. Not gonna happen. Screw you. So what I did was I looked at the combats that were completely unnecessary. I looked at the combats that were boring. I looked at the combats that weren't engaging, and I simply removed them. And to expedite the things in between, you have to move some pieces around. NPCs have to give more info than they were originally supposed to. But ultimately, that's what you need to do. And and it's also very important, specifically for like things like combat. Sometimes you can just say, "Hey, players, you get attacked by a monster and you beat it up." Like, it's perfectly okay to say that sometimes. It doesn't need to always. You don't need to always throw down. You don't need to throw a bunch of dice. You don't need to spend the next 20 to 40 minutes of your life fighting this one monster. No. Sometimes it's perfectly okay to say, "Yeah, players, you beat it up," or it submits to you, or whatever. Perfectly acceptable. Perfectly. Now, on the other hand, is like when it comes to non-combat stuff. When it comes to non-combat stuff, that also plays into sometimes you have to give things away that weren't originally supposed to be given out early. Like, there's some one-shots where it really leans in on the mystery and you're exploring around, and sometimes your players take too long to explore. And if your players are taking too long to explore, then, hey, like, the answer sometimes just falls into their lap. And, sometimes you got to do that because we're not here to schedule another session, right? We're here to play this one session. That's the end of the story. So cut the fat, move the things that need to be moved, and you're good to go. Alrighty. I'll go for another 5 more minutes, and then I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap it up because I got some things to work on, and then later on I gotta watch frickin' 2 fantasy shows back to back. I've got to watch me some Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings to not get spoiled on anything. Such a sad state of the world where you got to watch things the day they come out, or else you immediately get spoiled. Pretty unfortunate, but is what it is. So if anybody has any questions, concerns, comments, gripes, moans, or complaints, let me hear them, because I'm all for it. Let me hear it. Or if you want to continue lurking, that's fine too. Lurkers are doing me a solid. Okay. I recently appeared on a Steely Sam stream, and I know for a fact that he's going to make it a video of his. So maybe that'll drive up some subscribers if people know that I'm a YouTuber. Here's hoping. What are your thoughts on Session Zeros? Any must includes, must excludes? What my thoughts on Session Zero is ultimately you're like no matter what you do, like no matter how you call it, you always have a Session Zero, right? Like there's literally nothing. There's literally like the only like I'm trying to phrase this here. Like literally just inviting someone to session to play in your game is in essence a Session Zero, because when you get someone say, "Hey, come to my session," you are basically immediately signing a social agreement, right? Like just by saying, "Hey, come play D&D with us," you're signing a social agreement, and like you could call that a Session Zero. Now, the ultimate real Session Zero is when everyone shows up to the table and you sit down to talk about the campaign and what you want out of it and what you don't want out of it and all that fun jazz. So, you're having it no matter what. My must includes. So, my must includes these days are specifically I talk about, you know, the game, about, hey gang, what game are we playing? Are we playing a mystery? Are we playing what system are we playing? What kind of adventure are we doing? And sometimes it's me asking them, and sometimes it's me telling them, because sometimes it's me saying, hey, I'm going to be running this adventure. Do you want to play in it? And then other times it is me saying, hey, what adventure do you guys want to play? And then I'll run that adventure for you. So, you know, those are the typical ones. And then also, you know, that's like with everyone at the table. And then individually, afterward, I'll be like, hey, just let me know if you've got anything that you absolutely do not want in the game. Like, if you've got a phobia of something, like you hate spiders, then hey, just, you know, tell me in private, because you don't need to air that out to everybody. You know, you can just slide in my DMs afterward and say, hey, I don't want this in my game. I don't want child harm. I don't want spiders. I don't want, you know, X, Y, and Z, right? So those are my must includes. My must excludes? My must excludes specifically come in the form of, I don't like revealing much about the adventure, because ultimately I say, hey, I'm going to be running an adventure where, you know, you are, like, you go out into the jungle. And then, like, that's all I want to say. I never want to give away huge key plot points. I never want to give out huge details, because I want the adventure to truly be mysterious, and I want it to be an adventure. So I guess that would be my only exclude, is like I wouldn't give away much. So must include is asking for the adventure and phobias. Excludes is spoilers. You could probably skip one of these shows. I'll let you decide which one. I've been enjoying Lord of the Rings. I'll tell you what. I know for a fact that Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and literally any other thing on human existence is not for everybody, right? That's just the way it is. You know, Lord of the Rings isn't for everybody. Game of Thrones isn't for everybody. And even once again, literally any other piece of anything in human existence besides breathing is for everybody, right? Some people are even averse to water, even though you need water to live. Some people say screw water. But, you know, I personally don't hate either of the shows. I know that there's some people that hate some of the shows or all the shows. I personally don't hate any of the shows. I think that, you know, I think that they're. I'll tell you what. Considering how many 1-star reviews specifically Lord of the Rings is getting, I know for a fact that those people giving that show 1 star aren't actually legitimately serious, right? There's no realm where you can actually critique Lord of the Rings and say that is a 1-star show. You could, like, out of 5 stars, let's say, you could make the argument for 2 stars, and I could reasonably see people saying that it's a 3-star show, but saying that it's a 1 star, absolutely not. People are just being a little bit too hard, a little bit too aggro on it. Alrighty. Any more things coming out? 2 more minutes, and then I'll wrap things up here. Just 2 more minutes. I'm la-di-dee, la-di-da. I'm really curious about, like, right now I'm writing a bunch of, like, adventures and little, like, supplements here and there and everywhere. And I'm actually curious about what I'm actually going to do when I complete that. Like, am I going to just sell them all on Drive-Thru RPG? or if I'm going to have to create my own website. I'll have to figure that out when my writing's all done, because I don't know how people typically go out to consume products these days. I don't know how that actually works. I need to consult my fellow YouTube contemporaries there, because some of them sell their stuff on websites, on their own websites, and some of them sell their stuff on DM's Guild and DriveThruRPG and itch.io and things like that. I need to figure all that out. I need to figure out how to drive people there in the first place. And I will be driving them there through excellent content that I will be producing. So I can't wait to debut all of the fun adventures and stuff that I've been working on. That'll be a blast. Alrighty, well, that is gonna do it for me today. So thank you so very much, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for my wonderful patrons over there on Patreon. If you subscribe to my Patreon, you'll support the channel and you'll get a bunch of goodies in return. And thank you for the donos as well. So thank you so very much for everybody, and thank you all to the lurkers too. Thank you one and all. And thanks for all the comments and likes and subscribes and whatever else. Literally any sort of interaction of any kind in any way, shape, or form helps a lot. So thank you so very much. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all for listening. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. See ya!